friends, welcome to another episode of the 100 Book Challenge of 2020. Today we're going to be talking about numbers 31 to 40. Let's get into it. Number 31 was The Fill-In Boyfriend by Kasie West. This book was honestly such a surprise. I really enjoyed it. I didn't really know what to expect with it. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars, which I'm not like the hugest fan of YA contemporary. I enjoy them, but they're usually like not my go-to. I usually swing more towards fantasy. I don't know what it was, but I just really enjoyed this book a lot. So it's called The Fill-In Boyfriend, and the premise of the story is the main character, Gia's boyfriend, breaks up with her the night of prom, and all of her friends don't believe that this boyfriend exists. So she's freaking out, not knowing what to do. So she sees this boy parked in his car in the parking lot, so she gets him to fill in and pretend to be her boyfriend for the night, and surprise surprise, they end up catching feelings for real. It was such a cute, fun story to read. I just really liked all of the plot points, and I loved the interactions with the characters, and yeah, it was just really enjoyable. The next book I read was the final book in the Nevernight series, Darkdawn by Jay Kristoff, and wow, this was an adventure. It was the finale to the series, and I think Mia got the ending that she deserved, but I wasn't 100% happy with it. So the reason for that is there's kind of two love interests throughout the series. One is Trick, who gets murdered by the other love interest in the first book, and then, you know, something mysterious happens and he kind of shows up again for the later books. And so it was kind of this love triangle between the boy she loved who died and the new girl, Ash, who it felt more to me like she lusted after Ash than anything. Like, it didn't feel like true love to me in the same way that it did for her and Trick, because with the two of them I felt like it was really shown to me that they had romantic feelings for each other, whereas when she hooks up with Ash in the second book, it seemed more like Mia was just so sad and devastated and lonely about losing Trick, and so miserable about where her life was headed. And Ash just like happened to be there and happened to be really sweet and loving. So it just didn't feel as fated to me. And I guess that's fine. It's not like a story has to have fated star-crossed lovers. But to me it just felt a little forced that Mia ended up with Ash. But I was still happy that she was happy in the end. For me, the scale of the 3 books would go Nevernight, the first one, is the best book in the series, and they kind of just go down a little bit one after the other. Like, still all 3 books in the series are fantastic, but I do think the first one was this peak wonderment. And also, I think in a previous video I described Nevernight as like Harry Potter but with more sex and swearing. I forgot an important keyword, which is plus assassins. So it's like a Harry Potter school of assassins. So that's the, like, you know, the selling point of the story. But yeah, I really enjoyed the ending of this series, and I feel like it was well deserved. Next was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The story is about a girl named Star who witnesses a childhood friend of hers, Khalid, get gunned down by a cop right in front of her. And so she has to deal with the aftermath of police brutality and people treating her differently because she goes to a predominantly white school, whereas she lives in a more predominantly black neighborhood, and so she's kind of balancing these two sides of her life. One where she has to put on a certain facade when she goes to her white school, and then the other person who's in all of this pain and anguish because she saw her friend gets shot in front of her. I thought it was a really good story, and definitely brought up a lot of emotions in me. It was the kind of story that I really enjoyed while I was reading it, but I don't think I would reread over and over again. You know, it was a story to enjoy and then be like, okay, that's enough of that, I'm not going to reread it. I think Angie Thomas did a really good job in this book of just allowing the reader to experience that and really empathize with it on such a visceral level. Because when she cried, I wanted to cry, and when she got up in the car and started screaming about the injustice, I wanted to scream. And yeah, it was such a moving, powerful story in that regard. The next book I read was Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. And this is not the first book by Jacqueline that I've read. I've also read If You Come Softly by her, which is a story of a black boy and a white Jewish girl who fall in love. And that was such a good story. It's really short. It's almost like a novella, but I just inhaled that story. It was so good. So I thought I would give something else by Jacqueline a try just to see what her other writing is like. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It's also very short. I think that might be a trend with her books, even though I've only read 2, but she seems to go for shorter stories. So Red at the Bone is a story, it's kind of an intergenerational story of, a mother, a daughter, grandfather, all of these different characters. So it's a story about identity and interacting with your family and sexuality, parenthood. There's a whole lot of different themes getting discussed by the different characters in the story. And it's just a great generational humanity piece. If you like that kind of thing, I think you'd probably enjoy it. The next book I read was, drumroll, Scarlet by Marissa Meyer, the second book in the Lunar Chronicles series. And this is the book that this book is the reason that I picked up Cinder, because I read the summary of it and it's just like, sexy wolf guy, I'm into it. So, and it was great. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. My review is just like, oh my god, loved it, wolf is hot. So there you go. That's all you need if you like stories about sexy wolf boys. This is for you. But the story is, the whole Lunar Chronicles series is basically fairy tale retellings. So Cinder was Cinderella, and this book, Scarlet, is Little Red Riding Hood. So the main character, Scarlet, lives in France, and she works on this vegetable farm, and her grandmother mysteriously disappears. She goes missing, and then Scarlet is trying to find her, and she comes across Wolf in a restaurant of all places, and he has this strange tattoo of numbers on his hand, and he's just like making a living by like doing underground boxing, and he like is all wolfy and like can hear things and smell things, and he looks a little scruffy, and he's always super hungry, so he's always eating food. And for some reason, he's never had a tomato before, so the first time Scarlet gives him a tomato, he's just like, oh my god, which is like me with vegetables every day. It's like me with potatoes. It's like, it's just the best thing I've ever tasted. But yeah, this was so good. I think it might be my favorite of all of the pairings, because there's 4 in total in this series, which is why the ending of Winter makes me so mad, because I hate what happens to Wolf at the end. That's not really a spoiler, because I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to do a review in a couple episodes about Winter, so to be continued. Next was Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo, and this was another fantastic book. So good. I was just looking for something to listen to by audiobook, and the summary of this appealed to me. So it's about this woman, Yejide, and she lives in Nigeria, and so the book opens with Yejide having left her husband and has left her child, who we are told is dead, and she's working at a hair salon in the future, and then she receives an invitation to her husband Akin's father's funeral. So then she is going back home, and all these memories start to dredge up. So we see the backstory of Yejide and Akin and how they met and fell in love, and then all of the many complications that they have trying to get pregnant. And she wants so badly to have a baby, and she at one point goes through this thing. There's like a term for it, but I can't remember what it is, but it's when it's like a ghost pregnancy, so she thinks she's pregnant, but she's not actually. So she is stressed psychologically to such an extent because the family, so in Nigeria, sometimes second marriages, like second wives, are accepted in certain parts of it. So when Yejide can't get pregnant, they bring in this second wife for Akin so that he can get her pregnant, so that they can carry on the family line. And then there's all of these drama and things that are happening with the Yejide and the second wife, and it was just a really interesting story about a woman struggling to deal with her relationship with her husband's family and deal with the expectations of her culture and of the people around her to have a child, and also her own desire to have a child and not be able to, and her intense struggle with the pain of not being able to keep her child and have the child, you know, stay with her and stay alive. I really, really like this story. I gave it 5 out of 5. I also just love reading stories about other cultures just because it gives me a chance to learn something new about a new perspective that is not what I live and see in my daily life. And I just love getting that glimpse into other people's lives that way. The next book I read was The Butterfly Girl by Rene Denfeld, which is the second book in the Naomi Cottle series, which is about a woman who was abducted when she was a child and now grows up to be a child finder and helps to find other missing children. As per the other book in the series, Naomi has to find a missing child, so this time it is a little girl named Celia who has been living on the streets. She ran away from home and she sees butterflies everywhere. So that's kind of her coping mechanism to find some joy and some light in this hard world that she's living in, is to see these beautiful butterflies. So then in the city where she's living, children keep getting abducted and disappearing. So Naomi's trying to kind of track down that storyline. And in the meantime, her and Celia's paths intertwine. They grow closer as they bump into each other, and then eventually Celia disappears and Naomi has to find her. So I ended up giving this book 3 out of 3.5 stars, and the reason for that is because I just didn't really like the whole butterfly thing. I thought it was a little weird. Like the first book, The Snow Girl, imagining that she's made of snow to cope with what's happening to her, I thought that was really well done, and it was very believable for me. Whereas this book, the butterflies almost felt like Rene Denfeld just like really wanted to write about a little girl who could see butterflies, so she kind of like twisted and forced it into the story when it didn't really need to be in there. So I thought it would have actually been a better story without the butterflies, or if she had just had something different that was going on with Celia. I don't know. So I still really liked her writing and I liked the story. But it didn't do it for me as much as the first book. Next was Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia, and this is one of my top books of 2020. I loved this so much. 5 out of 5 stars. Like, hands down, one of the best books I've ever read. I don't know what it was, but it just got me right in the emotions. And so the story is Eliza is kind of shy and introverted, and she writes this webtoon series, like a webzine of, or it's like a web comic, fan fiction of this book series that's really popular. So she writes this web comic of the story, and it's super popular. Like, she's making a lot of money off of this. She's doing really, really well. Like, millions of people read this story, but her parents don't really know or understand that part of her life. She even like opens a separate bank account so that her parents don't see how much money she's making off of it, because they just don't really understand why she would want to be inside on her computer all day instead of like being out in the world, dating boys and doing sports and stuff. The parents were so thick in this book, like they drove me crazy, but they were kind of balanced out by her adorable brothers, who just turn out to be the sweetest cinnamon rolls at the end of the book. And they were just, it's like you just pray to have siblings like that, because they were so sweet. Yeah, so Eliza is working on this web comic, and she meets this boy Wallace, who is a writer, and he writes fan fiction about the book series that they love as well, and he really is a big fan and is actually one of like the leaders on the like message board on her website. So he's a big fan of her, but he doesn't know that she is the author. So they meet, and he's got this interesting thing where he's really shy and he can't really speak in public a lot. Like he speaks very, very softly or quietly, unless it's just like him and somebody he's comfortable with. So it's these two kind of awkward humans trying to figure out how to live their life together and be comfortable and figure out where their place in the world is. And I don't know, it just reminded me so much of like things that I've struggled with when I was a teenager. And also just you can't help loving somebody who knows that they have these weaknesses but are still fighting so hard to be happy and to do what they love. And it was just such a brilliant story. Definitely will be rereading it again in the near future. Number 39 was Recursion by Blake Crouch, which is the second book by him I've read. I also read Dark Matter a few years ago, which I think I probably gave about 4 out of 5, and this book was the same, 4 out of 5. Blake Crouch is so good at these like trippy, twisty-turny thriller plot lines where you're like, wait, what's happening? And things spin out of control in a way that you never expect is going to happen. So if you like sci-fi thrillers and you like a little bit of mindfuckery, I feel like he's perfect. The story follows Barry Sutton. He's a cop and his daughter died when she was a teenager in a car collision. It was like a hit and run. It causes him and his wife to divorce. And then we also have another character, Helena Smith, who is working as a scientist and is hired by this like billionaire guy to come and develop this kind of machine to be able to record people's memories. And this is really important to Helena because her mother has Alzheimer's, and so it would be a way for her mother to be able to like hold on to memories and not forget them. They're seemingly these two separate stories, but they end up intertwining in this really crazy, unexpected way, which starts off when Barry starts investigating these weird second memories that people start having, where basically they have one memory of their life and then also a second memory in black and white of a completely different timeline and completely different experiences. So you have the real memory and the ghost memory. And so one woman has these fake memories of being married and having a child, and because she can't tell the memories apart, she ends up killing herself. So Barry starts to investigate this suicide and kind of uncovers what's been going on with Helena and the billionaire's research, and the two stories kind of intertwine. And the story really just goes from like here to here, like it'll boggle your mind. And finally, number 40 was War of Hearts by S. Young, which is part of a True Immortality series. I've only read the first book in the series. And so this was after I read Scarlet. I was like, I really want to read more stories with werewolves because I was into the vibe. So I just looked up on Goodreads for books with like werewolves in them, and this came up. So the story follows this girl, Thea Quinn, who has this mysterious past, and the book opens to her being on the run from these people trying to chase her. And then we have, on the other hand, this leader of a werewolf clan whose name is Connell. And so this human man hires Connell to track down Thea, and he says, oh, she's a dangerous killer and she's done all of these crimes. So Connell has this special power where he can track down anybody in the world. He's just like a really good tracker. And so he gets hired to track down Thea, and they end up like traveling all over Europe, and there's lots of fairies and werewolves and vampires and all of these different creatures in the book. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars just because I was in the mood for it and it gave me what I was looking for. Me and my sibling do talk about it in our podcast, so I will link it below if you want to hear a little bit more about it. I won't go over everything again in this video, but yeah, if you're looking for a fun romance story about werewolves, feel free to check it out. Okay, that is books 31 to 40 of my 100 book challenge. In real time, I'm already at 95 out of 100, so I'm hoping to finish and get to 100 by the end of this month. So I have 2 weeks to read 5 books. I feel like I can definitely accomplish that. So yay, I'm excited to do more month-focused videos for November and December, like what I read in November, what I read in December, and maybe do something more on that theme once I finish the 100 book series. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching.